Hey, what's up everyone? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be reading Dragonseye. The Dragonseye is a 1996 science fiction novel written by the late Anne McCaffrey and is a part of her epic The Dragon Riders of Pern series. And this one is kind of dials the story back to what is known as the second pass, and the pass being when Thread falls. Thread being kind of this biological airborne menace that when falls to the planet Pern, basically consumes most organic matter, can only be killed by fire or water. And basically it's where the dragons and the dragon riders come in, and during a pass of Thread, they basically have to fly through the skies and kind of burn Thread to kind of minimize or reduce the amount of damage it causes. And in between those periods of time is the dragon riders serve various other functions in the society. So this one is taking place during this what is called the second pass. It's about 250 years after the initial landing when the first colonists came to Pern, and it's kind of towards the tail end of the transition from being a technologically advanced culture to a more, not primitive, but more rustic, if you will, kind of what later becomes the general aesthetic of Pern, which is this non-technological society. And whereas books that take place later on in Pern's history are kind of well into that kind of mode or kind of system of life, this is showing you basically now they're finally kind of entering it. The last bit of remnants of technology have kind of gone, but it's still kind of a transitional period. It's kind of the end of a transitional period, but it's still you can still see a little bit of people questioning the older ways. Why do we need to learn this versus this now? This is clearly where we're going. We should be more focused on this and not so much on that, simply because it just was the way things were. And it's really a story about basically transition. You're seeing, in a way, systems of governments kind of moving their focus from one to the other. They're kind of starting to establish how things are going to play out later on in Pern's history, and you're seeing kind of a bit more of a feudal system start to take hold, and you're basically seeing different kinds of clashes, different kinds of culture clashes, political clashes, because again, this is a bit of a tumultuous period in Pern's history where, again, society is kind of reforming itself, but it hasn't really solidified yet. So you're seeing kind of a bit of trial and error and different kind of views and opinions and ideas of, how things need to be. And it's all moving in one direction, but it's just going to be how much of what is in place versus something else. And right now you're kind of seeing different views, different opinions, different kind of approaches to society, commerce, and kind of getting a sense of the different kind of viewpoints that are kind of in this world, and seeing which ones are kind of win out over the other. Some of the political stances are much more conservative in their approach to everything, especially money. Others are a lot more liberal, and you're basically seeing kind of this balance, and how it's kind of like if you take a glass of water, and the surface can be very smooth, but if you kind of jostle it, it sloshes from one side to the other, and it does that for a little bit. At one point it's higher on this side, lower on this side. The other point it's higher on this side, lower on the other side. And eventually it kind of, levels out in between. There might be a few ripples here and there over time, but as a whole, unless something really comes along and messes with it, it's just kind of be an even keel. This is the point in their history where the water in the glass is doing this. You're seeing shifts in focus moving to and fro, and it's really seeing kind of this non-solidified system of government. I mean, different areas of Pern lean more one way or the other, but as a whole, they're still trying to figure it out. So it's kind of neat seeing that while they're still dealing with the initial foundation of their whole culture, which is the dragon riders and fighting Thread, when they're not dealing with that, it's interesting to see how they are dealing with essentially themselves. When they're not having to worry about imminent doom, they're trying to kind of figure out how they're going to live the day to day. What is the best way for this culture? What is the best way to move forward in the future together? What should the priorities be? How should those priorities be approached? and how is kind of the general needs of the people during the day-to-day best tended to, if you will. So it's a cool story. It might sound a little dry on the surface, simply because it sounds like it's doing more of politics, but it's actually a lot of good characters, and you see all this stuff from kind of a personal perspective. It's not just pulled back where you just hear a lot of political talk. It's a lot of people just on the ground, and you're meeting and encountering and following people who are of certain viewpoints. So you're really seeing what some of these views look like in practice. Like, okay, you're seeing certain characters who feel a certain way, who behave a certain way, and think their way of doing things is the right way to doing things, and then you kind of seeing that attitude or that approach put in practice, and you're kind of able to see how it plays out versus another character who does the same thing but has a different view on things. So you're able to kind of see a lot of these different views put in practice. So it's not just all theoretical. You're kind of, as the reader, as maybe the silent member of the story, seeing how it all plays out, and you yourself, and kind of determine like what might be the best route, what might be the best course for this world. And ultimately, if you've read books that take place later on in Pern's history, you kind of know where they go. But assuming you don't know where that goes, or you're just, even if you do, you're just taking this book for what it is at this particular moment in Pern's history, and just say, okay, well, regardless of how it ends up, how do I feel about this? What do I think? If I was a person in this world during this time, what would my stance be? And would it be shifted or swayed, based on these different individuals that you're encountering? And it's something that can kind of be applied to life too. People have different philosophies, different views, different ideas of how things should be and how we should go about conducting ourselves. So, depending on what your views might be, you might side with certain characters in this book that maybe I did not, and vice versa. So it's a cool story in the sense that while it's explaining how a world came to be the way it is, it also kind of makes you look inward a little bit too, and kind of makes you kind of ask yourself, like, why is it you have your own, ideological or political affiliations? Like, why do you think the way you do? How did you come to think that way? And it really makes you kind of look at yourself and realize that even though this is literally a world away, a lot of how they establish themselves, in terms of government and politics and just general infrastructure, isn't really that different than how we would do it here. I mean, you have to figure out a system that works, best, hopefully, for everyone, and that's going to be beneficial to the vast majority of people. And a lot of the ways these characters in this story go about trying to figure that out isn't all that dissimilar from basically how we do it. But again, it's not, on the surface it sounds like it's a very political story. It's really not. It's a lot of just individuals and their kind of personal takes on just everything. But they are kind of the avatars for a much larger political system that is slowly taking shape. But we learn about it through individuals on the ground level, through the day-to-day, through their wheelings and dealings with one another. And you kind of, from there, able to kind of just pull back, the magnifying glass and kind of see the big picture and realize that, okay, if we go with one group, this is the direction this world's going to head. If we go with another group, this is the direction the world's going to go. So, and it's a cool, again, world building story too. You get to see, kind of a lot of how things tick, how things work. And it's one of the Dragon Riders of Pern books, so it's always fun for that reason alone. But this one offers, some different stuff with the amount of books in this series. You get different flavors of different things, so depending on what your mood is, this might be, the book you've been looking for. But anyway, with that said, Dragonseye, have you read it? If so, what did you think? If not, as always, I'll put links in the description section below where you can go, check it out, pick it up, come back, give me some of your thoughts, let me know. Let me know what you think of the story, if you like it, if it makes you more curious to read more of the Dragon Riders of Pern books. This is one of the first ones I read. It might even be the first one I read too, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I read 2 or 3 within like a month span when I first started reading the series, and this was one of the first books I got, so it might even be the first one. But I know, regardless, I really enjoyed it, and it made me want to dive into the rest of the series, which I've since done. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. Peace!